We are continuing our study. We're in Revelation 17:18. We finished chapter 17. And what we've done, we've divided chapter 17 and 18 into two sections, two major sections. Section number one, which is chapter 17, we were looking at the destroyer. Thus, we were taking note of what John had to say concerning the beast, because the beast was the one that was destroying the harlot. When we turn to chapter 18, we see a second division, major division, and that would be the destroyed. The destroyer is the beast who's destroying the harlot, the city, Babylon. Now, we also then we subdivided those into basically seven different divisions. In chapter 17, we looked at verses 1 through 6 with the cry of invitation, the call to witness, fallen, fallen is Babylon the Great. We also took notice of verse 7 through verse 18, the cry of wonder or silence in astonishment, or as he says, wherefore didst thou wonder? Let me show you the wonder that you're sitting there amazed over. So that's what John was trying to do, was help the reader there, and I should say the revelator was showing John and the others and us, hopefully, if we study properly. So starting in chapter 18, we have 5 divisions. The first of the 5 would be the cry of proclamation. There is a proclamation. I think I've got one of them mixed with chapter 17. But anyway, verse 2, fallen, fallen is Babylon. That's what chapter 18 is about. Now, normally everybody agrees with 99% of what's in chapter 17 and 18. They just disagree with who they are. As you know, we look at the book of Revelation, thus chapter 17 and 18, as having occurred in 70 AD. The writing was before 70 AD. The writing was predicting what occurred in 70 AD. The major thought was a judgment proclaimed against the children of Israel or the nation of Israel because of their ungodliness. And that's what we're going to see within this chapter 18, who and what she's done. We took notice of verses 4 through 8 very quickly to call attention to the cry of separation, come ye out from among them. Verses 9 through verse 19, you have the cry of lamentation. In other words, there's dozens of words, dozens of times that John is talking about their crying, their wailing, their lamenting. So that's what's in that section. Chapter 18, verse 20, we see the cry of rejoicing. Every time we hear of things going wrong with somebody, we also hear things going right with God's people. And so that's what he's done here in chapter 18, verse 20, when he calls for the cry of rejoicing. Then we finished off in chapter 18, verse 21 through 24 with the 7th overall cry, the 5th out of chapter 18. And that would be total determination. It is terminated. And when he said it is terminated, he's talking about the city or the harlot. Going back to chapter 18, verse 1 through 3, we would read it this way as we hear a thunderous declaration of a completed spiritual act. Fallen, fallen is Babylon. That's in verse 2. We start with verse 1. After these things, I saw another angel coming down out of heaven, having great authority, and the earth was lighted with his glory. Thus, God is telling us something with that, and that is God is telling us that God is telling us. Verse 2, and he cried with a mighty voice, saying, fallen, fallen is Babylon the Great. We took note before this that Babylon the Great would be Jerusalem, Babylon is a reference to a city that's already gone. The book of Daniel, you guys are studying the book of Daniel with David, and he's pointed out that the book of Daniel is discussing Babylon and the judgment and the kings that are going to come. But anyway, he's talking about that kingdom, Babylon. Yet this verse is not discussing the physical, literal Babylon that you read of in Daniel. This is a figure of speech. Babylon has not been on the scene for centuries. She's nowhere to be found. They just found her recently, as a matter of fact. And when I say recently, since I'm older than most of you, a couple of 100 years ago. But Babylon has become a habitation of demons. I think your King James would say devils. Demons is always the better word for devils when you see the plural, especially. And a hold or a cage of every unclean spirit, and a hold or a cage of every unclean and hateful bird. He just let you know that she's fallen and they're going to be filled with ungodliness and animals of all sorts. Verse 3, here's why. For by the wine of the wrath of her fornication, mark that down, number one, fornication, number one. All the nations are fallen. Because of what she's done, she has led others into the same fornication that she is engaged in. Now, she's engaged from the standpoint of being faithful to God and having committed spiritual adultery, fornication. And in doing that, she has brought all the nations with her into that fornication or ungodliness towards God. He then adds, and the kings of the earth committed fornication with her. He then adds, and the merchants of the earth waxed rich by the power of her wantonness. And that again would indicate fornication, adultery, and so forth. It is a spiritual ungodliness and impurity, lack of chastity before God. And we've seen all of that before in chapter 16, and really before that, but chapter 16, we took notice of the fact that God is going to bring judgment upon Israel because of her ungodliness, her unfaithfulness. So that's nothing new. Probably the thing that might be a little bit new is the habitation, the hold of unclean and hateful spirits. When you look at the Old Testament with Zephaniah and you look at Isaiah, you take notice of a couple of times in which Isaiah and Zephaniah would use this same basic language to discuss a fallen and ruined nation. Nineveh became a fallen and ruined nation. Babylon became a fallen and ruined nation. Well, this Babylon, Jerusalem, this nation, she is a fallen and ruined nation. So we would have the phraseology, and I like this phraseology, and study has brought it out. Jerusalem, Babylon, and Nineveh all experienced a terminal point, a finished point, where their city was totally destroyed and their existing systems were dismantled. Exactly. That is what chapter 18 is telling us over and over and over again. That means if we agree with that, then we have to agree that chapter 18 is not talking about the city of Rome or anything like that. It is talking about Jerusalem. By the way, there's only 3 explanations that I can think of, and they're all just different views of the same explanation. But the basic explanation is it's the city of Rome, it's the city of Jerusalem. Now you might go into the city of Rome, no, it's the spiritual city of Rome, and then you go into a few things from there. But basically, those are the two. So, of course, our preliminary study would bring us to the conclusion that this is Jerusalem. Looking now at verses 4 through 8, we see the cry of separation. You just took notice that she, the harlot, is bringing all of these people, all of these nations, all of these merchants into idolatry with her harlotry, her fornication. So here comes a cry of mercy to the people of God. And I'm going to put it this way, a cry of mercy to physically and spiritually get out of the city. And it seems like he addresses both of those concepts. You get out spiritually because she's in the midst of sin. Don't be lingering around in the midst of that with her. And you get out of that city, Jerusalem, because she's going to fall and it's going to be a terrible disaster. Notice verse 4. I heard another voice from heaven saying, "Come forth, my people, out of her, that you have no fellowship with her sins." See the spiritual connection? You come out of her so that you're not connected with her spiritually. Her connection spiritually is connecting you with the fellowship of sins. Secondly, in the same verse, and that ye receive not of her plagues. What do you mean? Hold your finger right there and skip down to verse 8. Revelation 18:8. Therefore, in one day shall her plagues come, death, mourning, famine, and she shall be utterly burned with fire, for her judgment is come. So back up to verse 4 when he says in the last phrase that you shall receive not of her plagues, he has in mind if you stay, you will die. Before we go any further, let me cover with you Luke 21, verse 20 through 24. It would seem this is the major issue for these people. He's writing in the first century. He's writing before 70 AD and the total destruction of Jerusalem. And he's telling everybody that's there, let me give you warning, get out of the city. Well, we heard that before, approximately 40 years earlier with Jesus. Here he said in Luke 21:20, but when you see Jerusalem compassed with armies, then know that her desolation is at hand. It's close. It's soon. Then let them that are in Judea flee unto the mountains. Let them that are in the midst of her depart out. That is synonymous with what he just said in verse 4. And let not them that are in the country enter back in. Get out, stay out. If you're out, don't get back. Verse 22. Here's why. For those are the days of vengeance, that all things which are written may be fulfilled. What things which are written? The fall of Jerusalem. It's all written. God has it written down in a variety of ways. And he says, these are the days of vengeance. We have heard that all the way through the book of Revelation as well. Vengeance, vengeance, vengeance. Vengeance upon God's ungodly people who have become unfaithful. Verse 23. He becomes specific when he says, woe unto them that are with child, to them that give suck in those days, for there shall be great distress upon the land and wrath upon the people. What that does for us is let us know it's not the end of the world. There are those who look at Luke 21, Matthew 23, Matthew 24, Matthew 24, and Mark, and they conclude, well, Jesus is forewarning about the second coming of Christ when the world will be destroyed. Okay, then why does he tell pregnant women or women with small children, why does he tell them to get out of the city and go into the mountains? What good's it going to do for you to go into the mountains when the world is going to be destroyed? None. So Matthew 24, thank you, David. Matthew 24, can't hardly see you, but thank you. And Luke 21, they're not talking about the end of the world. They're talking about the end of the world of Judaism, as we pointed out. Verse 24, they shall fall by the edge of the sword and shall be led captive into all the nations and shall be trodden by the Gentiles. That would be chapter 11 of Revelation. We turn our attention now to verse 5 of Revelation 18. For her sins, that's the reason why she's going to fall. For her sins have reached even unto heaven. What does that mean? And God hath remembered her iniquities. That's what that means. Render unto her even as she rendered, and double unto her the double according to her works. In the cup which she mingled unto her double. How much soever she glorieth herself and waxed wanton, ungodly, so much give her of the torment and mourning. For she saith in her heart, I sit a queen, I am no widow, and shall in no wise see mourning. I am a child of Abraham. There's another way of saying it. You will fall. You will fall terribly. Don't be so full of pride, but they were. Therefore, in one day shall her plagues come, death, mourning, famine. She shall be utterly burned by fire. That cannot be Rome. Cannot be Rome. Absolutely cannot be the city of Rome. And it cannot be spiritual Rome. With saying that, let me quickly add, it can be spiritual Rome. Well, you just said it couldn't. Understand the nuance I'm going to give. John is talking about the harlot, the apostate Israel, God's people. Anytime down through time, if you have apostate people of God, you have the same harlot. By philosophical thought. What? God has in mind the harlot Israel. But he recognizes there are going to be other apostates down through time. They too shall reap hurt, plagues. In what way? Doesn't tell us. But we do know they're going to come on the scene. The spiritual apostates will come on the scene. And that means spiritual Rome or any other ungodliness in that sense. If that doesn't make sense, let me know. Now, I want you to take notice. He says, come out from among you. Don't be a part of her sins. Turn with me to Ephesians chapter 5, verse 3 through verse 11, and I will call your attention as well. Ephesians chapter 5, I will call your attention as well to 2 Corinthians 6. There is no concord, there is no fellowship, there is no partaking, there is no sharing between ungodliness and godliness in the spiritual realm. Don't do it. Here we have in Ephesians 5, 3 through 11, to don't be partakers with the sins of those around you. Lest somebody misunderstand. Ephesians is a Gentile congregation. He's not telling in Ephesians, he's not telling the Ephesian brethren, get out of Jerusalem. He's talking to the Ephesian brethren that they, like Corinth, like others who are fellowshipping, who are partaking with the sins of those who are in sin around them. Don't do that. In verse 3, but fornication, all uncleanness of covetousness, let it not even be named among you as becomes saints, nor filthiness, nor foolish talking, nor jesting, which are not befitting, but rather giving of thanks. That's what ought to come out of your mouth. For this you know of a surety, it's no guess, that no fornicator, nor unclean person, nor covetous man who is an idolater, hath any inheritance in the kingdom of Christ and God. If you think that you can be saved while you're committing adultery, if you think that you can be saved while you're a drunkard and alcoholic, if you think that you can be saved while you're in the midst of all of these people, going where they're going, doing what they're doing, dressing like they're dressing, and talking like they're talking, you can't do it. Let no man, verse 6, deceive you with empty words, for because of these things cometh the wrath of God upon the sons of disobedience. It is disobedience. Verse 7, be not therefore partakers with them. Come ye out from among them. Don't be partakers with them. There's no concord. There's no fellowship. For ye were once darkness, but are now light in the Lord. Well, if that's the case, and it is, walk as children of light. For the fruit of the light is in all goodness and righteousness and truth. That's what that's going to produce. Ungodliness and darkness is not going to produce that. Look at Israel. Look at any ungodliness. Verse 10. What you're to do is proving what is well pleasing unto the Lord, and have no fellowship with the unfruitful works of darkness, but rather reprove them. Now, that second part, a number of brethren are avoiding. A lot of brethren will not fellowship error, but they won't reprove error. Now, don't be silly about it. I mean, I'm not going to walk up to a 6'6" Mormon and tell him he's a dirty, rotten rat, whether it's true or not. He could be a linebacker, and I could have a broke back because of that. We are in chapter 18, verse 9 through verse 19, and we have before us our fifth overall cry. This is the cry of lamentation. As I mentioned to you a couple of weeks ago, and I think last week as well, what is beneficial for you is to go through and mark down all the times that you hear the word cry, wail, lament, moan. Mark all those down, and it will help you to recognize that's what this section is all about. Verse 9. The kings of the earth who committed fornication and liveth wantonly with her shall weep and wail over her when they look upon the smoke of her burning. When they see Jerusalem destroyed, here's how the people are going to respond to that. Standing afar off for the fear of her torment, saying, woe, woe, the great city Babylon, the strong city, for in 1 hour is thy judgment come. In 1 hour. I was somewhat perturbed. Oh boy, you're perturbed. In chapter 18, verse 8, therefore in 1 day, in 1 hour, one commentator after the other would say, Jerusalem did not fall in 1 day. It took 3 months. And you just want to look at them and go like, choo, it went over your head, didn't it? You're not trying to be arrogant about it, but you're wondering what in the world they study. You're wondering why they would. Well, I don't wonder. What they're trying to do is say it's not Jerusalem. Well, what city fell in 1 day? Literally fell in 1 day. You're not going to find it. But if you understand it as a figure of speech, 1 day, 1 hour, as very quickly, didn't take very long, that tells you it's Jerusalem. And it also tells you it's not Rome. Rome hadn't fallen yet. We're back to the passage. Verse 11, and the merchants of the earth weep and mourn over her, for no man buyeth her merchandise anymore. Doesn't do any good to do any business with her. She's not there. Merchandise of gold and silver, and he goes through a host of precious material. And then verse 13, he talks about the spices, the incense, the ointment, and wine, and cattle and sheep, and slaves and souls of men. 14, the fruits which thy soul lusteth after are gone from thee, and all the things that were dainty and sumptuous are perished from thee, and men shall find them no more at all. Now you have in verse 11, the merchants of the earth weep and mourn. And like I say, that word weep and mourn, wail and lament quite often. Well, in verse 15, you have the merchants again. But you have to make a division. Not all merchants are the same merchants. In verse 11, you have, and let's say, the merchants of the earth. In verse 15, you have the merchants of the sea. Why would I say that? Because as you read on, verse 17 is connected with verse 15. And John writes, for in 1 hour so great riches is made desolate, and every shipmaster, and every one that saileth anywhither, and mariners, as many as gain, merchants, their living by sea, stood afar off and cried. So you have two different kinds of merchants. You have the merchant who's receiving the things from the sea, and you have the merchants of the sea who are selling it to the merchants of the land. Both of those, whether you're a sender, whether you're a traveler, a truck carrying it or not, and whether you're a receiver, John is taking care of all three of those by saying what he has said. There's not going to be any commerce in this city. You will take notice of verse 18, cried out as they looked upon the smoke of her burning. Verse 19, they cast dust on their heads and cried, weeping and mourning, saying, woe, woe, the great city, when all that had their ships in the sea were made rich by reason of her costliness. For in 1 hour she is made desolate. You heard 4 times in that one section, and then also in the earlier verse, that her death is coming. Her desolation is coming. It's coming very quickly. She was destroyed overnight. Another way of putting it. Now, what you hear, what I would like to do is ask each one of you, and I wish we were in class and we had all 24 of you together. I would like to ask the question, do you see Wall Street merchants in this section? Or do you see a city who's on a trade route? Which one do you see? Well, I haven't thought about it. Right. Commentators wanting to eliminate Jerusalem as the city that's being destroyed, they read that and they say, look, this is Wall Street. This is the center of the world in commerce. And I stand on this side and I say, where did you get that out of the text? You didn't. You had a preconceived concept that it's Rome. Rome is a big city of commerce at that day and in that time. And Jerusalem was simply a trade route. Folks, this is a trade route that John is discussing, not Wall Street. I'm going to read to you some of those who would say it cannot be Jerusalem. Here are their words. It cannot be Jerusalem. Neither do the merchants of the world care in particular if she lives or if she dies. A sure sign that is not the economical powerhouse for the globe. Why did you say that? John didn't even suggest that. She's not a economical powerhouse for the globe. Another one, Tony Garland says in his charts, Jerusalem, world commerce of center, world financial center. That's not true either. So what they've done, they have set up a straw man in order to get their point across and make their point believable. Chapter 18, these merchants, they were involved in worldwide commerce because this city that is being destroyed is in the midst of, and she is the center of all financial activity. It's not in the chapter. It fits Jerusalem, and here's why. Just went over one of them because Jerusalem doesn't have to be a powerhouse. That's a straw man. However, various scholars advocate Jerusalem was on the usual trade routes. When you're on the usual trade routes and there's interruption, you got a problem. And that's what John is talking about. Josephus would point out in the first century, yet hath not its great antiquity, nor its vast riches, speaking of Jerusalem, nor the diffusion of its nation over all the inhabited world, nor the greatness of the veneration paid to all of its religious account, been sufficient to preserve it from being destroyed. It was a great city. It was a royal city over 10 provinces besides itself. But it was not the financial center of the world. He continues on and he says, they also burnt down the treasury chambers in which was an immense quantity of money, immense number of garments and other precious goods there reposited. And to speak all in one few words, there was that entire riches of the Jews were heaped up together in the temple of Jerusalem. Jerusalem was their bank, but it was not the bank of the world. We continue on and we take notice, unless you have something you'd like to say or add. We take notice very quickly of chapter 18, verse 20, the cry of rejoicing. Now you'll notice that we just went through the cry of mourning and lamentation and hurt. Now you have the cry of rejoicing, just the opposite. The opposite. Verse 20, rejoice over her, thou heaven, and ye saints, and ye apostles, and ye prophets, for God hath judged her, judged your judgment on her. This is a sure sign that this is Jerusalem. You will also see this same rejoicing in chapter 19, which we will study next week. Last of all, you have in verses 21 through 25, the cry of finality. This is a visual and a vocal cry of total termination, making clear the reason. In verse 24, will help us to understand why she's totally terminated. In her was found the blood of the prophets, the saints, and all that hath been slain upon her. And what he just said in verse 20 was, you can rejoice because of the judgment of all your judgment upon her. We're now looking at verse 21. A strong angel took up a stone, as it were a great millstone, cast it into the sea, saying, thus with a mighty fall shall Babylon the great city be cast down, and shall be found no more at all. Number one, the great city. Let me call your attention that Josephus 3 times in his history book calls Jerusalem the great city. It's not unusual for John, a Jew, before the city fell, to call it a great city. She shall be cast down. She shall be found no more. That city has been terminated. The voice of harpers and minstrels and flute players and trumpeters shall be heard no more at all. Craftsmen of whatever craft shall be found no more in her at all. The voice of a mill shall be heard no more at all. The light of a lamp shall shine no more at all. The voice of bridegroom shall be heard no more at all. 4, verse 23, the last phrase. With thy sorcery were all the nations deceived. Being one who believes this is 70 AD in Jerusalem, I would point out to you the finality of the fall of Jerusalem. Where is the high priest of Israel? Hasn't been on the scene for 2,000 years. Where are the priests of Israel? They have not been on the scene for 2,000 years. Where are the sacrifices? Where are the restored feast days? Priest, no sacrifice. Therefore, no feast day. Where is the king? Where is the temple? Where is the altar? Where is the incense? Where is the Ark of the Covenant? In 587 BC, the Jews had whereof to rebuild after Nebuchadnezzar destroyed the city, and they did rebuild with all of those things intact. But now, and for the last 2,000 years, they have not been able to build one bit. Why? They don't have them. They don't know who they are. One Jew cannot tell you whether he is of the tribe of Judah or the tribe of Levi. Can't prove it to save his soul. He can reference his ancestry, but it doesn't prove anything. When Jerusalem was burned up and the temple was burned up, all of the records of Judaism were destroyed by design of God in order to say, done, finished, over, terminated. It's no longer the people of God. Her destruction was sudden and swift. Her destruction was sure and certain. Her destruction was total and complete. Her destruction was final and eternal. Her destruction was just and righteous. However, her destruction was not without clear warning. Jesus warned, Moses warned, Jesus warned, the apostles and the disciples warned, the writers warned, and John is warning yet again. That is chapter 17 and 18, as I see it.